Hey everyone, welcome back to my vlog. My name is Kayla and welcome to my channel. So we just welcomed almost 3 weeks ago, we just welcomed our second baby boy, Colton Allen, and we're so overjoyed to have him here with us finally, and I'm finally getting around to filming my birth story, so I'm going to just jump right in. So we really wanted our son to be born on July 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, or 13th to fill our family's chronological birthday orders of the months of June and July, or to be the same as my birthday or my husband's. And none of those 5 days happened, and he was born 4 hours into the 14th of July. So he barely missed the days he was supposed to be born by 4 hours. We planned, God laughs. Is that not how it goes? So I remember when midnight hit on that night and I was in the hospital in labor and I was like, we're not going to make it, it's going to be the 14th. So our little buddy wanted to make his very own due date that had nothing to do with the numbers and the days we liked within 4 hours outside of that. So on July 12th, my birthday, I woke up and got out of bed and immediately had the labor feels, where I had the cramping, the yucky feeling, the total feeling of today's the day, I'm going into labor. I may not have contractions or consistent contractions, but this is it. I remember how this felt with Connor. And it was like something switched in my body right when I got out of bed. I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. I even texted family and said, today's the day. Everyone be ready, be prepared. Whoever needs to be in their spots, go. And so as the morning progressed, it was my son's last gymnastics class. And I was like, okay, my mom was already in town. I was like, okay, we're going to take him to gymnastics. It's already halfway to the hospital from our house. We'll bring our hospital bags in the car. My husband was at work, so we could always just meet at the hospital. So we planned for that. I went to gymnastics, and as I got there, everything subsided, and I felt completely back to normal. I was so devastated. I was like, I wanted a birthday buddy or the day after birthday buddy fill our family's order of all our birthdays in line. And so I was like, oh man, this is not happening. So I was so bummed. And I also had an in-office doctor's appointment that day at 1. So I held on to hope that I was like, okay, maybe he'll say I'm so progressed, just go to the hospital and I could be like, it basically induced the rest of the time. Even though that wasn't my plan, I was like, well, I'll already be at like a 4, so I won't even really need to be induced. I'll just wait in the hospital. Well, I hadn't progressed at all in dilation, despite the fact that how I felt, and I had, pretty, random contractions, which I knew wasn't labor yet, but I was pretty much there. And I had told him that, and he was like, well, it could be any day. And I was like, darn it. And I'd only thinned out 20% more in effacement at that point, and I was literally the same 2 to 3 centimeters dilated, and I was like, how? I'd been having Braxton Hicks contractions like crazy. I was 39 weeks exactly that day, and I was like, starting my curb walking, I was so defeated. I'd gained like 5 pounds that last week of pregnancy for no reason, literally no reason. I don't do anything different. And I was like, this just stinks, so that's going to be on my chart. Surely it's wrong, wasn't wrong. That's what happened with Connor's birth too. I was so devastated. So I was so upset. I was like, this is not gonna happen today. And it was my birthday, and I was so sad. And so I just went around the rest of the day just kind of moping and, just disappointed, and everything else was good at the doctor's. And so the next morning on July 13th, which was a Saturday, I woke up, the same thing. Got out of bed, I was like, this is it. It really is it. It's gotta be. I feel the same as yesterday. This is gonna be it. But then as the morning progressed, it went away as well. And I was so upset. I mean, at that point, I was like, what if this baby doesn't come? Like, I wasn't even able to set like an induction date after 40 weeks at the doctor's appointment that day before, because everyone had gone home and for the day for the induction scheduling. So I was like, man, I don't even have an end date. I was like, this literally could take another 2 weeks. I mean, I was only 39 weeks exactly. And so I was so upset. And my mom, who had been here for a little while helping me because I was so uncomfortable and feeling like I was in labor almost every day, she went home. And she's like, well, I just got things to do. I'll just go home. It won't happen today. And I was like, if you leave, I'm going to go into labor, and then it's going to be really bad. I rely on her for being there for me and transporting my son. So I was like, what am I going to do? And I was like, whatever. So she left for the day around about 11:30 noon, and I felt completely normal. After my son woke up from his nap later that day around 2, we ran some errands. We did last minute things around the house, which I'm really glad I did. We visited his family for the day, and when we were over there from about 4 to 6 p.m., I felt a lot of contractions. But they were like 5 minutes apart, 30 minutes apart, very sporadic, and some were Braxton Hicks and some were real. So I was just like, okay, like, whatever, like, I'm sure this is false again, I'm not even gonna say anything. So I just breathed through contractions the whole time we were over there. And then we came back home at 6, and I remember getting out of the car, and I was like, I told my husband, I said, I feel yucky. I just feel really, really yucky. And it's a good thing, you know. He was like, oh, that's good. And so I was like, I really feel like, you know, I don't know, I feel funny, I feel off. And he's like, all right, so let's just, you know, play by ear. And so we played outside with my son with water toys. We went on a family walk. We, you know, did the whole bedtime routine for my son. And that whole time from 6 to 8:30, I had contractions every 5 minutes. Through the walk, through sitting, through laying down, through my shower. It never stopped. It was contractions every 5 minutes. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. My husband was encouraging us to go to the hospital to get checked out. And I was like, but Cody, I'm not even in any pain yet. This can't be it. And he's like, no, I know this is it. I can feel it. I can tell. We just need to get checked out because this could get bad really quick because second babies come quicker once you're in labor. And we had to make evening plans for my son. We needed to decide, do we drop him off for the night right then because it was his bedtime and start the night over at Cody's parents' house? Or do we come back here or do we go in the middle of the night where it's an emergency situation, which it most likely could be? And I was still in denial. I was like, this really isn't it. I said, well, worst case, he'll just spend the night at their house and we just pick him up in the morning and we just have a night to just relax and sleep in the morning if it's really not this is it. And if I get sent home from the hospital. And I was so anxious to go get checked because I'm like, they're just going to turn me away because what if, you know, I do think I'm in labor now, but what if I'm not progressed enough for them to keep me? And I just would not want to go home and I'd feel scared to have a car baby. So I had a lot of anxieties, and so we quickly loaded my son, loaded the hospital bags, got his overnight bag, dropped him off at my in-laws' house for the evening. He was taken care of. We got to the hospital around 9:30. And I was like, Cody, I'm just going to have to walk the 30-minute loop around the hospital just to make sure I'm consistently contracting enough for them to keep me. And he's like, okay. So I walked the 30-minute loop. I probably had 2 or 3 contractions, I think 3. And I was like, okay, like, let's just go inside now. So I didn't know what to say because I was induced mostly last time. And so I was like, where do I go? What do I do? Where's triage? What does this look like? I'm like, oh, we'll just go upstairs. So I go up there. And I was just standing there like, and they're like, what? And I'm like, I don't know, I think I'm having a baby. And they're like, oh, well, how many weeks are you? I said 39 weeks in 1 day at that point. And they're like, okay, well, go on back to triage. And I was like, okay. And so it's got me all set up in this room, which ended up being my delivery room. Who knew? And so I was just like, okay, so they got me in a gown, I gave like a urine sample, and I lost a lot of my mucus plug when I went to the bathroom. And I was like, that's exactly what happened with Connor. This is labor. I was like, they can't send me home, I won't leave. I'm too scared. I would literally give birth in the car, trying to get back to the hospital or at home. I know how this goes. I know how my body is feeling. So with the pain level I was in, I guess I was around 4 centimeters dilated. And so they checked me, and I was 4 centimeters dilated. I was like, I knew it, 90% effaced. And they said, okay, so the way this works is we'll check you again in an hour to make sure you've progressed, and we get to keep you if you have. And I was like, okay, so I was a nervous wreck. So Cody gets back in, and because he had to wait outside until they checked me in or something. And so I was like, oh my gosh, what if they don't keep me? And so as the hour, and actually it was an hour and a half, as the hour and a half goes by before they come back to check me, my contractions got stronger and closer together. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, what if I have the baby now? Like, I was like, okay, the pain I'm in, I'm probably like a 6 or a 7. So they checked me and they're like, oh, you're a 6.5. And I was like, I knew it. I could tell. I said, and they said, you're staying? I said, great, I would like the epidural right now. And they're like, okay, we'll get it called in, we'll get blood work, get the IV set up, let that go for an hour, then we'll call the anesthesiologist and get you in line. I said, all right. So I was like, all right, sounds good. And they get the IV person in. They only had to try twice because I got the best of the best. And I was so excited because last time, I don't know if you remember, for my first son, they dug around my arm for an hour and a half and it was torture. I mean, I looked like I was beat, like up and down my arms. They tried everywhere until they finally got it in my hand. But anyway, I don't have trouble being sticked, but they apparently do have trouble getting it. So they only tried it twice, so I was very pleased with that. So I was like, this is going well. And I was handling the contractions well, even though I was not able to talk through a lot of them at this point. My mom, I had called her, so it was about, when I got admitted to the hospital, or checked in, it was 10:30. So we got to the hospital at 9:30, walked the loop, and then about 10:30 is when I fully got checked in. And so midnight is when they checked me again, and I was 6.5 centimeters. So at that point, I texted my mom. I was like, hey, this is really happening. So at midnight, she travels back to Chattanooga and gets here at 1:30 from Knoxville. And I was like, it's really, really happening. This is it. Like, we need to be here. And so she arrives just after they got the IV in, everything's set. It had been dripping for a while, and because they have to do that for a certain amount of time before you get the epidural. And so it had been going for, I think, 45 minutes, and then they got the anesthesiologist in after my blood work had cleared of the sample they took from me, of something about platelets being right, and so everything was, of course, fine. So they get the anesthesiologist in, and it wasn't the same one I had the time before. And I said, you know, hey, I have scoliosis, significant scoliosis, but it didn't matter, it didn't impact my epidural with my first birth, and I had an amazing experience, and I could fully move from the waist down, but I had zero pain. It was amazing. And so he goes, well, it's not going to be that amazing this time. And I was like, well, that's a strange thing to say, and not very confidence inducing, so I was like, sure, okay, whatever, ha ha ha. And I had asked if he was the best of the best, and he was the best of the best for that shift. So I was like, okay, that's what I've got, and I need the epidural. So I was just very satisfied with that. And he gets started, and he proceeds to dig around in my spine to place the epidural for 30 to 45 minutes, which normally it takes 10 minutes, tops. And I was concerned. Blood had been pouring out of it, dripping down my back every time he had readjusted it, put it back in. And I don't know why he was struggling. He got frustrated. He said it was because I was sitting up too straight. I'm like, hey, I can't lean forward anymore. My stomach's, pretty big out in front of me. And so he finally got it placed, and it felt funny. It was like pinching on my left side. And so I kind of just ignored it, and I was like, of course it doesn't feel good. And he administered the first dose immediately, and I felt it rush down to my left thigh, the very top of my leg, and that was it. And I knew right then I have a problem, because the time before I was numbed completely from here down immediately. And I expressed that to the guy like right away, and he goes, well, it takes 15 minutes. And I said, no, something's not right. I should be feeling something. And they're like, well, it's gravity based, so if you're only feeling on the left side, roll to your right. And I was like, it's not the left side, it's only my thigh, that's it. And he just, said, all right, we'll just give it 15 minutes. Well, at this point, I'm having very, very, very strong contractions. They checked me again, I was at a 7. And I was like, okay, this is getting real. And 15 minutes go by. Of course, I feel no different. I have no pain relief whatsoever. My leg's numb, the top of it, but that's it. Everything else, my area down here, my stomach, my sides, the size of my legs, my back, everywhere, feel everything. Contractions are like 2 minutes apart. And I'm panicked. I recognized my predicament at that moment. I turned to my husband, he was on the right side of my bed. I said, this is what's happening. I can do it. I just don't want to. But here's what's happening. And I knew I was in for it. I was like, I have to change gears. I would never prepare for this. I would never guess this would happen. But to survive this, I have to realize this, accept it, adapt, move forward because I will not make it. And I have no choice. So I changed gears. I said, all right, we're doing this. I'm having an unmedicated birth. I've done limited research on this, so I kind of knew how to prepare. I was terrified. I was like, I can do it. I can do it. I'm tough. I've got this. My mom's on my left side. At this point, it's serious. It's getting real. She's fanning me because I'm drenched in sweat from the pain. My husband's holding my hand, encouraging me, and I was like, okay, like, I've got this, I've got this. And for, at this point, it's like 1:30 a.m., 2 a.m., and I was like, I can do this, I can do this. Second labors are faster too, and once I start pushing, it'll feel better with those contractions. So I just went into a zen state. I couldn't hear anything around me. I didn't answer anyone's questions. I couldn't talk. I literally focused every ounce of my being into each contraction and to keep my body calm and as relaxed as I could, because I knew if I lost it, it was over. I had to stay over it, stay calm, stay on top of it, stay ahead. And I had to do that for each contraction while I just tried my best to make it through. As the hours went by, it felt like a chainsaw was being ripped across my stomach. I was being torn from the inside out. My back, the muscle spasms, the sides of my legs felt like someone's chiseling and peeling away the muscles from my legs. The sheer pain coming from my uterus, moving down with each contraction. I mean, it felt like I was on fire. It literally felt like I was lit on fire, the burning. And each time, over and over, I would get a small break between each one, and just enough to pray. And I prayed each contraction. I knew my faith will get me through this, and I prayed each contraction. I said, I can do this, Lord, if you help me through each one. I know you can't take the pain away, or you won't take the pain away. I just need help overcoming each contraction. I'll take it one at a time. And I prayed for it to be quick, because I couldn't even comprehend what was going on around me. And, I told the doctor, I told my nurse, I told the anesthesiologist many times, it's not working, it's not working, it's not working, please help me. And between contractions, I would advocate for myself as best I could during that short amount of time. It was like 30 seconds between each. And so finally, my anesthesiologist had been giving me more doses of the epidural, and realizing that nothing's happening. My left thigh would just get number and number, and that was it. Like the literal square of my thigh was the only thing that was being touched for pain. And I just couldn't move that leg. It'd fall off the bed, and I had to have my husband pick it up for me. And that was it. I could move my leg, I could move my abdomen, I could get up, I could do everything minus that left leg. Obviously it wasn't working. And so I had the anesthesiologist kept giving me dose after dose. He got to 6. And I mean, he wasn't even allowed to do any more after that. And it was just going nowhere but that leg. And he's like, this is impossible. At that point, he was very frustrated with me because I was not letting it go, obviously. And he said, if this were true, you'd be screaming bloody murder down the hallway, because they had just checked me and I was 9 centimeters. And he goes, at this point, you'd be screaming bloody murder down the hall. You have to be getting some relief. There's just no way. I said, sir, he goes, are you sure you're not feeling pressure instead of pain? I said, sir, I've had a baby and I'm human. I know the difference between pressure and pain. This is 100,000% pain. Watch me through a contraction. There is a big difference. And I said, I don't have the energy to be screaming down the hallway. I'm putting everything I have into these contractions to stay as calm as possible. I can't lose control. I can't. I will die. I will not make it. I thought I was dying. And I couldn't even express what I just said to him. And I just was hoping that someone could relay that, but I just said, I know the difference between pain and pressure. This is pain. It's sharp and it's this and that. I feel like I'm dying. My abdomen's ripped. I feel like chainsaw, I'm on fire. Blah, 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 blah. And so they had checked me after that, and I was 9 centimeters, or 9.5, I think, and at this point it was like 4 a.m., or maybe even 4:15, and so he was like, well, I can replace your epidural. Obviously it's not in the right spot, I guess. And I said, sure, let's try it. The second that I say that, my water breaks on its own. Just gushes everywhere, which is weird. Really weird feeling. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then he goes, well, we're too late now. And I was like, yeah, I think we are. I would normally be like, no, let's go for it. I can't do this. But my instincts, I knew. And we were right there at the end. I was like, well, this is it. and so literally it's like 4:15 and maybe 4 or 4:15 a.m. on Sunday, July 14th, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is literally happening. This is literally happening. And they get my feet in the stirrups. I'm like, wait, you just said I was 9.5. I'm not even ready to push yet. I'm not at a 10. They're like, well, by the time we get your feet up here, you're going to be a 10. And sure enough, like almost as they get my feet up, I can feel his head in my birth canal. Same as I did with Connor. And I was like, hey, it's here. This is what's happening. And they were like, yeah, this is what's happening. And I was like, okay. And so I go to push, and it didn't alleviate the pain. Each push was that much more painful. I was like, I said, I can't do this. I thought each time I pushed was going to help the pain, help that pressure release, and this is not. And I said, how am I going to do this? I can't do it. And they said, just push, we'll make it over, get it over quickly. And I was like, okay, it's 4:15 at this point, or 4:25 at this point. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I didn't push. I just pretended like I did, because I could not push. The sheer force of me leaning forward and then pushing my legs up with each contraction was what was pushing the baby out. Because I literally pushed as hard as this. I was like, okay. And I just pretended. And if they caught on to that, I would have changed my method and stopped doing that and actually pushed, but they didn't. And the baby came after 10 minutes of pushing, probably like 5 or 6 pushes. Baby boy flew out. He came out, screamed immediately, peed all over me, and cried, screamed bloody murder for that next hour for the skin to skin. I breastfed, and I could not believe it. The pain ended immediately the second he was out. She stitched me up, which was kind of painful, but I was distracted, and I only had a small tear. It was Connor. I had to have an episiotomy because he came out like this, with his hand above his head, so they had to cut because he was stuck, and I only pushed for 30 minutes with him, and still. And so with this one, I pushed for 10 minutes, and no episiotomy, just a small tear she had to stitch up. And delivered my placenta before she stitched me up. Easy. I think it was smaller than Connor's placenta from what I remembered. Cody cut the cord, and I couldn't believe I did it. And when I was leaving the hospital later that next morning, I saw the anesthesiologist, and I said, I could have died, man. I said, what's wrong with you? I was so angry. And he's like, well, you got your baby here now. And I was like, yeah, no thanks to you. I mean, really. I mean, I'm glad he gave me all those doses and tried. But, I mean, and when the anesthesiologist came through the next morning on rounds, the one I actually had for Connor, who I would have killed for, took a survey, and I told her all about my experience. And she goes, well, that's 17 out of 40 that night that he messed up. And I was so upset. So upset. That night there were so many patients. There was 40 coming in, and when I did come in, people were giving birth in the hall. People were giving birth in ambulances. It was absurd. People were standing against the hall crying and screaming trying to get in, and they were just booked. And that's why I gave birth in the birthing suite in the trauma room, because I wasn't supposed to. And I got to go in the recovery room in a birthing suite instead of the recovery rooms downstairs, and it was almost like an apology from them. Not really, they were just overcrowded, but it was justified. And I was like, okay, this is worth it. I get a suite to recover in. Yeah, so I was just so grateful he was finally here. I'd never been more grateful in my life to give birth and be done with it, and I was very satisfied after that, knowing this is my last baby with full certainty. My 2 boys I love with all my heart. This is just how it's supposed to be, and I can never give birth again. I can't. If my scoliosis does that again, I can't do it. So this is it. My family's complete. I've never felt more closure in my life, and I cannot believe I gave birth unmedicated. Now, the one thing that stinks about all those doses he gave me that didn't work, and it only going to my thigh, well, for more than a day, I couldn't move my left leg at all, because he gave so much dose to my leg that only went to my leg. So Cody had to carry me to the bathroom, carry me everywhere I went. I was basically paralyzed from like hip to toe on that leg, and I just drug it with me everywhere I went. It'd fall off the bed, he'd pick it up for me. And so that part stinks, and I was very scared it would never come back, but I did it. I gave birth without an epidural. I'm just going to say that because it did not work for me. And I feel so incredible that I accomplished that, and like I can do hard things, and women are amazing at what we can do, and I'm proud of myself for getting through that and keeping that mindset. And I was so grateful. Labor was so quick and I only pushed so quickly. God was truly there with me. He's there through every step of my life. And it has a hand in everything. And I see that in every small detail. And this is just proof. And my labor for Connor was 26 hours total from first contraction till baby was fully there. And with this baby, Colton, my entire labor was 10 hours straight, and so, or 10 and a half hours straight. So that was amazing because I couldn't have made it any longer. And I knew from the very start of this pregnancy I did not want to be induced, and I didn't know why. I knew with Connor I wanted to be induced, and that was the right decision for me, and it was perfect. It was a beautiful experience. I have zero complaints. But for some reason I did not want that this time, and I didn't know why. And everyone kept telling me to do it so I could plan, I could have my mom here to help me more, same for my husband before they started back for work, the sooner the better. And I said, no, I have such a strong conviction to let this happen on its own, like starting, like to go into labor naturally. And I just don't know why. And even my doctor was like, well, okay. And so, you know, both babies were born at 39 weeks and 2 days, by the way. Crazy. And 39 weeks and 1 day is where like that switch happened and labor started. Crazy, crazy. I could feel it, like hormonally. It was really weird. Anyway, and so they say when babies' lungs are finished developing, that switch, that flip of a switch happens and tells your brain, and that's when labor starts. But anyway, so I was convicted not to induce, and so now I know the reason. God unveiled it to me, because if I had been induced this time, I would have chosen on my birthday, because that was the only day that my doctor was available. And so it would have been 2 days prior, and my body wouldn't have been ready then, and I would have had to have had Pitocin. And if the same guy had done my epidural, which most likely, because they're usually on call for shift, for chunks, because it was going into that weekend, I would have had to endure Pitocin contractions without a working epidural for a longer period of time, and because that slows labor down too. And I tell you, I would not have been able to handle that. I would have literally died. So I thank God I didn't have that, and I just let my body go into labor on its own, because that wouldn't have worked, and I would have just had trauma from birth, which were this one I feel like I didn't. I was on that line, but it would have for sure then. So God directed me to that path of just going on my own, and I got to feel what it was like, completely just giving birth on my own. I might as well have given birth at the house. And if I had known what I know now, I wouldn't have got the epidural at all, because it obviously didn't work, and my leg was so numb. It hindered me from what I needed to live and do and move around at the hospital and change my pad and everything. So I should never have gotten in the first place, but how would I have known that? So I got my precious baby boy here, and I cannot believe I did it. And thanks for sticking around for my birth story. We only had to stay in the hospital for, we made very sure that the next morning we got to leave. So we're only in the hospital for a little over 24 hours. I think it ended up being about, I guess it was more than that. It was probably like closer to 30 hours. But still, it was not 2 days or more, like with Connor's birth. We made sure to keep baby very warm, because that's what they got Connor for, as he was too cold. And so baby boy, when us left that next morning, on Monday morning, and we came home to my mom and my sister and Lucy and Connor, and we were just so happy to be home and be a family of 4 now with our sweet Lucy. And that's that. So he was 7 pounds, 2 ounces, 19 and a half inches long, born at 4:36 a.m. July 14th, 2024. Colton Allen. It's Colton Allen. That's a family middle name for my husband and my husband's middle name. And Colton, we love so much to go with the name Connor, our first boy. And he has the same initials as my husband. And lots of interesting things that coincide with him. They both have club feet, bilateral, both feet. And also the movie Heaven is for Real. I love that movie. It was very inspiring, and that little boy in there is named Colton. And that movie always touched my heart. So there's another reason for his name. Also, if this had happened for my first baby, Connor, I wouldn't have had any more kids, because I would be too scared that this would happen again. So God also had this happen for my second baby and not my first, so I I had a great experience for Connor. This happened for my second, and he also let me know, like, this is it, like, you did it, like, no more kids for you. And I wouldn't have had more if I had this experience the first time. So I'm very grateful for both my boys, because Connor would be an only child if that had happened for his birth. And it would have been terrible because his was an induction. So God is truly involved in your lives, even when you don't think so. Look around and look at the signs and look where he leads you and guides you. Anyway, thank you guys so much for listening. See ya. Bye.